Hello again, and we are back in our second video of the series Positional Sacrifices. We are gonna continue with the pawn sacrifices. Right now we're gonna see a great pawn sacrifice by a less well-known player, Martinez. And he played in 1883 against the first undisputed world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz. So, the pawn sacrifice will be directly made. In the opening, it's a pawn sacrifice for an attack. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e take d4, knight take d4, queen h4. Of course, this move is very rarely played right now, but over 100 years ago it was quite popular. And actually queen h4 is a tricky decision. This move leads to a very unclear position, but white has the opportunity that we will see right now to sacrifice directly a pawn. Knight b5. In my opinion, a great move. White is giving a central pawn on e4, which is of course quite unpleasant, but is disturbing the development of black, and pawn c7 is directly under attack. Black probably has to take on e4, that's the best black can do. White continues with bishop e3. Quite a logical development. Of course, as well, a move as bishop e2 followed by short castle is an opportunity as well. Bishop e3. And black has to go king d8. There is just no other way to defend the pawn on c7. King d8. White continues with knight d2, a very usual development. Queen g6, bishop d3. Once again, white is sacrificing another pawn for a better development. All white pieces are gonna be very soon in an attack, and the position around the black king is going to be very dangerous. Black is accepting the sacrifice. Queen takes g2, bishop e4, queen h3, knight f3. White is definitely planning somewhere to castle long. The position of the black king on d8 is getting more and more dangerous, and as well white's development is clearly much better than the black's one. d6, probably the best. The bishop on c8 is getting activated, so it can go maybe to g4 next. Knight g5, white continues to be active, and of course it's the right plan. In case you sacrifice two pawns, you have no time to wait. You need to be active, you need to try to gain something from these positional sacrifices. Queen d7, queen d5, as well of course bishop d5, been a very tempting move to make. After bishop d5, black probably would have to go knight e5, and just knight take a7. We are winning one pawn back, plus somewhere we are threatening just to take on c8 and maybe to capture the b7 pawn as well. So bishop e7 would be a normal way to go on. Knight takes c8, king takes c8. White is winning the second pawn back. And we find out that actually white is a bishop pair. White's position should be better. Maybe black is doing more or less fine after a strong move as knight h6 followed by knight f5, but of course the position of white is clearly more pleasant. So we go back to the game. Queen d5, white continues to play for development, knight e5, and white is castling long. Actually a very nice play by white, I would have done the same. White is two pawns down, but the black's position of the king on d8 is very dangerous. There are a lot of threats, as for example queen take e5 somewhere, then knight take f7, as well as maybe just a move as f4 could bring black nothing well. Black has to play knight f6, the only chance. The queen on d5 is hanging as well. It is great for black to exchange at least a piece by playing knight take e4. Queen take e5, it'd be not a must. As well, queen b3 is looking quite decent. Probably black had to go h6 to hunt away the knight from g5, and knight f3. White continues to dominate the game. Yes, two pawns down, but with a very strong attack. queen take e5. Now we come to a position with a lot of exchanges. D take e5, knight take f7, king e8, rook take d7, bishop take d7, knight take h8, bishop take b5, bishop take b7, and of course the game continues in quite an unclear manner. Right now, of course, the knight on h8 is almost caught. This is not so pleasant. Clearly white could have done better than that. But once again, what we have to pay attention on is the opening pawn sacrifice, with first playing knight b5, attacking the c7 pawn, giving the e pawn for the attack, and later on a very nice second pawn sacrifice by playing bishop d3, giving the g2 pawn for further development, with bishop e4, knight f3, followed by knight g5, queen d5, and long castle. I think it's a very nice example on a positional pawn sacrifice where we are gaining a long-term attack as well as initiative for these 2 pawns down. So up to the next great game with a positional sacrifice, and it is between Nagy and Virik. So we are having a French defense, quite a popular line even up today. The main point of the opening is black is castling short, white is castling long. At some point white is gonna start the attack, of course, on the king side, and black is gonna start his attack on the queen side. Still, of course, it is a very well-known theoretical line. I don't think we should focus our attention on the opening. But a little critical moment I still want to mention, bishop b5, a really great idea to remember. White is first provoking the move a6 and only then going back to d3. The idea of this whole thing is gonna be visible later. It is basically not to let the black bishop from c8 to go to a6, because now the black pawn is gonna be placed on a6. In case of bishop d3 immediately, of course black could go b5, followed by b4 and bishop a6. So a little thing to remember for the future, bishop b5 is a really very nice move. a6, bishop d3, b5, black is starting his play on the queen side as expected. King b1, very typical. b4, knight e2, knight c5, h4, and as well white is starting his play. We are still not in the position where the positional sacrifice of a pawn will be made, so let's just enjoy a couple of moves till then. Bishop d7, black is finishing his development. Of course, move as rook fc8 is very typical. b3, as well this. Somewhere white is avoiding the move knight a4 followed by knight c3. As well, something like b3 is pretty standard. Rook fc8, h5, and black is doing a tricky move, knight a7. The idea remains the same, to create some threats around the white king, and of course black is following two ideas at the same time. One is to play knight b5, knight a3, or knight c3, and the other one could be to play bishop b5 to exchange the bad bishop on d7. Bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, and here we come to the place where Nagy decides to make a great pawn sacrifice for a long-term initiative and to create a long-term threats around the black king on the dark squares. f5, an excellent decision. Black has to take on f5. Now this pawn is of course an extra pawn, but white is getting a very strong play almost on the spot for this extra pawn. h6, white continues to play on the dark squares. g6 is almost forced, and a very nice move, queen e3. The idea of queen e3 is to play e6. We can take a look even at the variation. Let's say black would do any move as knight b5, is to go e6, and in case black would take bishop a6, to go queen e5, threatening the mate on g7. So after queen e3, black is almost forced to play bishop e6, avoiding the e6 move, And white continues with what he started. G4. Another very nice move. White continues to opening the black's position and trying to explore the dark squares. I think quite easy to see the black king on g8 soon will be in big trouble. Black is obliged to take fg, there is no other way to go on. And queen f2, with a simple idea of playing queen f6 next. f5, it seems like there is no better choice for black. E take f6, bishop f7, stopping white from playing f7, followed by queen f6, knight d4. As we can see, white is just a pawn down, but is totally dominating the position. The knight on d4 is just a rock, the pawn on g4 will fall, it is clear, and the king on g8 continues to experience quite big trouble. Knight c6, black is trying to exchange the knight. Rook d e1, very logical. We can expect the rook to go to e7 next. Queen b6. And knight e6. Basically, the game is more or less over. So, let us take a look once again what exactly has happened. We had more or less a normal position, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Nagy played a really fantastic move, f5. This great positional pawn sacrifice is quite usual for the structures in the French defense, especially in the structures where the dark squares could be explored by white. So f5, ef, h6 is clearly something that we should remember. A very nice positional pawn sacrifice. In our next game, we're gonna see a bit deeper sacrifice idea. It is between Brodsky and Joshua, and the game comes from a classical Queen's Gambit. Of course, this is still all very well known, and white is doing quite a fashionable move of playing g4, bishop e6, h4. This kind of development maybe around 20-30 years ago would be just impossible, but right now it is a very fashionable line. White is trying to be active on both sides. White is keeping in mind the idea of playing somewhere maybe queen b3, and for the moment is trying to dominate the king side. Knight d7, in case black would accept the pawn sacrifice on the spot by playing bishop h4, queen b3 would be very strong now. There is no more queen b6, a very typical defense, which is now losing just a full piece. So black would have to go b6, after which knight f3, bishop e7, and knight e5 would give a great play for white. As well, we can see a very typical example on positional pawn sacrifice. But it's not the main point of the game, which I wanted to show you. So, the game followed knight d7. Now already the pawn on h4 is hanging, white is playing g5, and black continues with h6. Quite a logical decision by black. Black probably been expecting white to take or g take x6, after which knight h6 would follow, and basically white would reach nothing by pushing g4, h4, g5, and so on. White lost a lot of tempos, plus destroyed his own structure. But here comes the move that probably Joshua been not expecting to see on the board. And g6. A very nice positional pawn sacrifice, and as well quite a typical one for this kind of structures. White is giving a full pawn, and of course black needs to accept a pawn on g6. In case of knight g f6, white can just take on f7, bishop take f7, bishop g3, with clearly a better position for white. Let's say white idea could be as well to play then knight g e2 or knight f3 followed by rook g1 with a great play on the g file. So basically black is forced to accept the sacrifice with f take g6, and white is following with bishop d3 attacking the g6 pawn, knight f8, black has to defend it, queen c2, the pawn continues to be under attack, forcing black to decide what to do next. g5. Probably the most logical reply. In case black would continue defending the pawn with bishop f7, white is having a very easy play by knight f3, followed by knight e5, attacking the g6 pawn plus dominating the whole center. And white, of course, doesn't need to worry about the position of his king on e1. It can always castle long and feel very comfortable on c1. By the way, white as well could at some moment threat to play e4. So, the game continued with g5, h take g5, bishop take g5, and another nice move by white, bishop g3. White does not hurry with some concrete actions, but just continuing enjoying the domination of his pieces over the board. Black continued bishop f6, probably black been afraid of knight f3 followed by knight e5, but after bishop f6, white is gaining a new opportunity of playing knight ge2. The white knight is going to f4 and maybe to g6 if needed, or h5. In the game came h5, a quite logical reply as well. Black is threatening somewhere to play h4 and at the same time trying to be solid. Long castle, h4, and another very nice move by white, e4. So basically white is exploring the very bad position of the black king on e8, which basically got stuck in the center, plus the great domination of the white pieces, the unlucky positions of the black knight on g8, f8, as well rook h8 is probably not the best piece ever. e4, knight h6, black tries to develop, bishop f4, g5, bishop d2, d take e4, bishop take e4, and basically our example is over here. The game continued quite randomly, but the moment on which we wanted to focus is the moment when white played the move g6. This is the moment which been critical to understand the positional pawn sacrifice. A very beautiful pawn sacrifice, g6. Once again, we destroy the black's pawn structure, and we try to dominate with our pieces practically all over the board and to explore black weak squares. Plus, the idea of playing e4 is very, very nice. So, thank you for listening to me. This series of 2 videos been dedicated to positional pawn sacrifice. I hope you have enjoyed it. And we continue our next videos with positional sacrifice, but this time of an exchange.